So after Artur Beterbiev's very impressive 7th round TKO victory against Callum Smith, it made me think and it made me ponder, and it definitely didn't have me reconsider because I already knew my position, but it made me really, really stay confident in my original view that Artur Beterbiev is definitely on the pound-for-pound list. Now, before this fight, it was kind of 50-50. It was kind of split if Beterbiev was on the pound-for-pound list. I feel more people had him on their list and didn't, but it was close. It wasn't a super wide gap. It wasn't a super obvious choice. And I feel after his very impressive and honestly emphatic performance against Callum Smith, I feel it's very clear that he is on the pound-for-pound list. In this video, I'll be breaking down why he's on the pound-for-pound list, what he's done in his career, and why he's above certain fighters that didn't make my personal top 10, because there are some fighters on my top 10 that a lot of people have on their top 10 that I don't. In this video, I'll be breaking down why Beterbiev should be higher than they are. Now, first of all, Artur Beterbiev, he has quite a few accolades overall. I mean, obviously, he's a unified champion, holding 3 of the 4 titles at 175. That's super impressive. He's been super dominant, 20-0, 20 knockouts, not a single controversial outing, not a single close fight. He's had competitive fights like the Alexander Gvozdyk fight. That fight was competitive. An Anthony Yard fight, that fight was competitive. But it wasn't close because he was able to get his opponent out of there in both of those fights and get dominant, emphatic stoppage victories. He is 8-0 with 8 knockouts in championship bouts. He has multiple title defenses. Obviously, 8-0 with 8 knockouts in championship bouts. That means he has multiple title defenses as well. He is 5-0, 5 KOs against former or current world champions. Those fighters include Tavoris Cloud, which he fought very early on in his career. Gabriel Campillo, another guy fought very early in his career. And then these 3 were actually all solid. Alexander Gvozdyk, Joe Smith Jr., and Callum Smith. When he fought Gvozdyk was coming off his very impressive victory, dethroning Adonis Stevenson, being the man to take Adonis Stevenson's WBC title that he held captive for many years. He was the man to dethrone him, which I find very impressive and honestly very commending. And Artur Beterbiev was able to pull off I don't know if it was actually an upset, but I know that the betting odds were virtually even for that fight. So in many people's minds, the upset, including my mind, against Alexander Gvozdyk. Then he took on Joe Smith Jr., who was on a bit of a tear prior to fighting Beterbiev. Now, yes, he did come off that Maxim Vlasov performance, a fight I felt he lost. It was a very bad performance on Smith's end. And obviously, he was the underdog against Beterbiev, but Smith was coming off the Lidia Alvarez win and the Jesse Hart win, and he was my 2020 Fighter of the Year due to those 2 victories he got in 2020. Beterbiev demolished him in 2 rounds and made a true statement. It was such an emphatic, destructive victory. A lot of people thought Smith would give him a really good fight. A lot of people were even picking Smith to pull off the victory because they felt that stylistically he could catch Beterbiev on the chin and maybe put him away. He took him out in 2 rounds. I was there in person. It was honestly a little embarrassing for Smith how easily he got taken out by Beterbiev. And then he took on Callum Smith, who a lot of Canelo fans, a lot of people in general thought had a really good shot of pulling off the victory. Many people thought it would be at least a very tough fight for Beterbiev. And yes, Smith did give Beterbiev issues in spurts, but overall it was a very dominant, very explosive, and impressive victory for Artur Beterbiev. Now, Beterbiev has been super dominant in his career, obviously. He hasn't had a single controversial outing. He's 5-0, 5 knockouts against current or former world champions. And you have to keep in mind he only has 20 pro fights, so 8 of his 20 fights have been title fights. So nearly half of his career have been title fights, which is very impressive. And 1/4 of his career have been against current or former world champions. 1/4 of his entire career has been against champion-level fighters. Now, obviously, that's not as good as someone like Naoya Inoue, but Naoya Inoue is number 1 pound-for-pound for me. So Beterbiev doing it in 5 of his 20 definitely earns a lot of respect. It may not get him number 1, 2, or 3, but he's definitely on the list. Probably in the 8 through 10 range, but he's on my pound-for-pound list without doubt. Another thing that needs to be mentioned about Beterbiev's resume is even though he's only 5-0, 5 knockouts against current and former world champions, that doesn't mean he's only 5-0 against good, solid fighters. Anthony Yard is a very solid fighter who never held a belt. That wasn't counted in that accolade. So Anthony Yard was a very solid win for Beterbiev, and that's a guy who never held a title. Marcus Brown was a solid win for Beterbiev. He never held a title. Callum Johnson was a solid win for Beterbiev. He never held a title. No one even talks about the fact that he beat Kalajic. I always but I always mispronounce his first name. Radovoj Kalajic, the same Kalajic that many people felt got viciously robbed against Marcus Brown. Beterbiev took him on and destroyed him and won in very impressive fashion. So he has some good wins aside from his title victories, but he has fought some really good opposition when you include the champions and former champions he's fought as well. I mean, Callum Smith, Joe Smith, Alexander Gvozdyk, these are all good names. And the thing is, he's not taking many tune-ups. If you look at his last 6 fights, 5 of those 6 fights were against solid fighters. Gvozdyk, Deans, I think Deans was like the one tune-up he took. Gvozdyk, Deans, Brown, Smith Jr., Yard, and Callum Smith. I mean, his resume has been continuously good. He's been continuously dominant. He's held 3 of the 4 titles for quite a bit now. Since June of 2022, he's been a unified champ of 3 of the 4 titles. So he's been 1 belt away from being undisputed for a while, for nearly 2 years now at this point, 1.5 years. He's 1 title away from going undisputed. I mean, Artur Beterbiev is without doubt on the pound-for-pound list. I can't understand if anyone doesn't have him at least at number 10 at this point. Now, I'm going to break down some of the fighters that many people have on their list that I don't. And I'm going to explain why I have Beterbiev above them. Now, the first one I'm going to bring up, it's funny because I think it's inevitable that everyone knows I'm going to bring him up. Gervonta Tank Davis, I have to bring up. Gervonta Tank Davis is on a lot of pound-for-pound lists. He's actually relatively high on a few pound-for-pound lists. Now, off of ability and off of talent, Tank is definitely a top 10 fighter. But off of what he's done in his career, he can't be on my pound-for-pound list, honestly. If you look at his resume, look at what he's done. There's claims that he's a multiple weight champion, which, I mean, I'm not saying he isn't. He technically is, but is he really? I mean, the way he got those belts, and a lot of the times they weren't even the official title. He's 5-0 with 5 knockouts in world title fights. So Beterbiev is 8-0 with 8 knockouts in world title fights. And I will give Tank this. He is 8-0 with 8 knockouts against former or current world champions. So it's kind of funny. Him and Beterbiev, their resumes are literally swapped. Beterbiev is 8-0 with 8 knockouts in world title fights and 5-0 5 knockouts against current or former world champions. Tank is 5-0 5 KOs in world title fights and 8-0 8 KOs against former or current world champions. When you look at those former current world champions that Tank has beaten, Cristobal Cruz, come on, that means nothing. Jose Pedraza, solid win, but he was weight drained. Jesus Cuellar, he brought up in weight. Hugo Ruiz was a last-minute replacement, and he was never that great. And he was brought up a couple weight classes. Yuri Gamboa was washed, but that wasn't a terrible win, but he was washed. Leo Santa Cruz, he brought up a weight class. Rolando Romero, he technically holds a belt, but no one considers really a champion, and that's not really that great of a win. And Hector Garcia. So those are the 8 current or former world champions. None of those names stand out to me, honestly, at all. None of them stand out. I would say his best win wasn't on that list. His 2 best wins weren't on that list, and Ryan Garcia and Mario Barrios. Barrios was weight drained, obviously, but it was still a good win, still a respectable win. And Ryan Garcia was a solid win. So he does have a good resume. He has accomplished a decent amount in sports so far, but he's never been a unified champion. He's definitely never held 3 of the 4 titles in a weight class. So 3 out of the 4 titles in a weight class is ultra unified. He's never been in that type of position. He's held only 1 belt at a time in his career. He's technically a multiple weight champion, but as I said, the way he got those belts and who he beat to get them, and them not even really being a full belt a lot of the time it's a secondary title. Beterbiev is above Tank for me on the pound-for-pound list. Another man that's actually gotten a lot of credit for being on the pound-for-pound list as of late, and I do think he is a fringe pound-for-pound fighter just like Tank is, but I don't have him on there yet, is Bam Jesse Rodriguez. Now, Bam Jesse Rodriguez has accomplished a lot in his own right. He's a very good fighter, very impressive fighter. But guys, he's only 2-0 with 2 knockouts in championship bouts, and he's only 2-0 with 1 KO. Hold on, I don't know why it says 2-0. He's only 3-0 with 1 KO against former or current world champions. Those world champions being Carlos Cuadras, who was out of his prime, Sor Rungvisai, who was out of his prime, and Sonny Edwards, which is a good win. But that is not better than Beterbiev. I'm sorry. 2-0 with 2 knockouts in world championship bouts, and 3-0 with 1 KO against former or current world champions. He's fought good quality opposition, but he does not have the quantity to be above Beterbiev. So overall, Beterbiev, he's fought multiple really good fighters. He's been consistent. He's been dominant. No controversy, no controversial fights. He's been great in his career, and he's on my pound-for-pound list. Near the end of it, but he makes it for me. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Tell me your pound-for-pound list. Where do you have Artur Beterbiev? All that good stuff. Do you have Tank and Bam Rodriguez above him? I personally don't. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one. God bless. I'll see you guys later. Peace.